You guys just keep asking for the more Reddit stories. So, I'm ready with the new tale. Let's read some cool, interesting cheating wife Reddit stories. And guys, I'm trying to hit 1,000 subs before the end of the year, and I think we can do it. So please subscribe and let's get straight into this one. My wife cheated on me with her ex. They took our kids, but I got it all back and destroyed her. They say a man's life can change in an instant, but I never truly understood that until the moment I opened that envelope. It was an ordinary Tuesday, kids off to school, me at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, and Emily, my wife of 8 years, bustling around, pretending everything was normal. The envelope was thick, plain white, and bore the stamp of a family court. My name was scrawled across the front, and inside was a custody petition, signed by Emily. She was taking the kids, our 2 beautiful boys, Daniel and Lucas, and her co-petitioner, none other than her ex, Ryan. Ryan, the man she had sworn up and down was just a part of her past. He had been her high school sweetheart, the love that never worked out, and the guy she assured me I had nothing to worry about. I believed her, of course. Emily was always convincing, always calculating. Jake. Her voice broke through my shock. You look pale. What's wrong? I looked up at her, holding the papers like they were laced with poison. What is this? I asked, my voice low, trembling with barely controlled anger. Her face hardened in an instant, a flicker of guilt quickly masked by defiance. Jake, you've always been too busy with work, too caught up in your own world to notice what the kids really need. Ryan can provide the stability they deserve. I laughed bitterly, a sound so foreign even to myself. Stability? You're leaving me for Ryan, and now you're trying to paint me as some unfit father? She didn't answer. Instead, she crossed her arms, her stance combative. This is what's best for all of you, Jake. You'll see in time. But I wasn't about to let her walk away with my boys, or my dignity. That night, while Emily slept in the guest room, her decision, of course, since things had been strained, I began my investigation. I scrolled through her phone records, accessed emails, and searched her social media profiles. Emily was meticulous, but even she had left crumbs. Late-night calls to Ryan, photos from suspicious outings with the kids, emails sent from a separate account I didn't even know she had. It all started to make sense. The coldness in our relationship over the past year wasn't just stress, it was deceit. But the real dagger came when I discovered the messages. Hidden in a forgotten folder on her laptop was a series of emails between her and Ryan, plotting to make me look like an absent, unreliable father. They planned to use my long work hours and a minor fender bender I had last year as evidence of my supposed recklessness. Emily wasn't just cheating on me with her ex. She was trying to erase me from my own children's lives. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just a fight for custody. This was war. War is about strategy, not brute strength. Emily and Ryan thought they had it all figured out. But what they didn't know was that I wasn't the same naive guy who used to trust Emily blindly. They wanted to play dirty? Fine. I dragged them through the mud first. The first step was to stay calm, even when my entire being screamed to lash out. Losing my temper would only feed into their narrative of me being unstable. So I plastered on a fake smile, played the role of the confused but cooperative husband, and quietly began setting my pieces on the board. I started with a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, a shark. Lisa Dunbar came highly recommended by a friend who had gone through his own brutal divorce. She was ruthless, thorough, and unapologetically expensive, worth every penny. Lisa didn't sugarcoat anything when I laid out the situation. They're trying to paint you as negligent, she said, scanning the documents I'd collected. But here's the thing. They underestimated you. These emails? This is gold. We'll use them to destroy their credibility in court. I didn't stop there. Over the next week, I started documenting everything. Every time I picked the boys up from school, every meal I cooked, every soccer practice I attended, it all went into a neatly organized file. I also installed a few discrete cameras around the house. If Emily was going to use our home as a battleground, I needed evidence of her behavior, too. And then, I waited. Emily, oblivious to my growing arsenal, continued her charade. She'd play the doting mother in front of the kids, But as soon as they were asleep, she'd disappear into the guest room, whispering on the phone to Ryan. One night, I caught a snippet of their conversation through the thin walls. "He's too stupid to fight back," Emily said, her voice dripping with arrogance. "Jake doesn't have the guts to stand up to me, let alone Ryan." I clenched my fists, my blood boiling, but I forced myself to stay silent. They thought I was weak, and that was my greatest advantage. The final piece of the puzzle came when I decided to confront Ryan directly. Not in person. No, I wanted him to let his guard down. I called him from a burner phone, pretending to be a reporter investigating Emily's custody case. At first, Ryan was cautious, but his ego got the better of him. "Emily's kids deserve better," he said smugly. "She's been miserable for years with that guy. He barely spends time with them. And me? I've always been there for her. For them." I recorded every word. The next day, I handed the evidence to Lisa. She grinned like a predator about to pounce. "This is going to be fun." The court date was set, but I wasn't done yet. Emily and Ryan were playing checkers. I was playing chess. I dug deeper into Ryan's past, using a private investigator to uncover skeletons he'd probably forgotten about himself. DUIs. A history of skipping child support for a kid from another relationship. And then the jackpot. A report of domestic violence from an ex-girlfriend, quietly settled out of court. Ryan was about to regret stepping into my life. As the hearing approached, I kept my cool around Emily. I played dumb, pretended I was resigned to whatever outcome she wanted. "Maybe you're right," I told her one night. "Maybe the kids would be better off with you and Ryan." Her smile was infuriating. "I'm glad you're finally seeing reason, Jake." Little did she know, I wasn't seeing reason. I was seeing revenge. The courtroom was crowded that day. Family court hearings aren't usually dramatic, but this one was different. Emily and Ryan walked in together, all smug smiles and matching outfits, as if they were a power couple in some trashy soap opera. I sat on the other side of the room, calm but ready. Lisa was beside me, her sharp suit and sharper demeanor radiating confidence. "Let them gloat," she whispered to me as we waited for the judge. "It'll make the fall that much sweeter." Emily's lawyer opened with the usual rehearsed spiel. She painted a picture of a loving mother trying to rescue her children from a distracted, career-obsessed father. "Ms. Walker's only goal," the lawyer intoned, "is to provide a stable, nurturing environment for her children, which Mr. Walker has consistently failed to do." I wanted to laugh out loud. Emily hadn't mentioned stability once when she was sneaking around with Ryan. Then it was our turn. Lisa stood, a wolf in legal armor. "Your Honor," she began, "this case is not about the best interests of the children. It's about my client's wife orchestrating a betrayal, both as a partner and as a mother, to prioritize her own selfish desires." She handed the judge the stack of evidence we'd compiled. Screenshots of the emails, transcripts of Ryan's recorded phone call, and the damning records of his past. The courtroom went still as the judge began to read. Emily's face turned pale, her smugness replaced by the slow dawning realization that she wasn't the mastermind she thought she was. Lisa didn't stop there. "Let's also talk about Ryan," she continued, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "This is the man whom Ms. Walker believes is a suitable father figure for her children. Yet, here we have evidence of multiple DUIs, a history of financial neglect, and, most troubling, a domestic violence report from just 3 years ago." Ryan's expression shifted from confident to panicked. "That's not true," he blurted out, standing up. The judge shot him a glare. "Sit down, Mr. Ryan, or I'll hold you in contempt." The tension in the room was electric. I glanced at Emily, whose wide eyes were glued to the evidence being presented. This was the moment she realized she had miscalculated. But Lisa wasn't done. "And finally, Your Honor, I have video evidence from Mr. Walker's home, showing Ms. Walker's erratic behavior in front of the children, including a recorded altercation where her temper escalated dangerously. I had captured the incident just a week before. Emily had screamed at me over a misplaced set of car keys while the kids sat frozen at the dinner table. The recording didn't just show her losing her temper. It showed her scaring the children. The judge leaned back in his chair, scanning the evidence. "We will recess for deliberation," he said. I could see Emily's lawyer whispering furiously to her as the judge exited. Ryan leaned over, whispering something that made her scowl. Whatever facade of unity they'd walked in with was starting to crack. When the judge returned, the ruling was swift and brutal. Custody of the children will remain with Mr. Walker. Visitation for Ms. Walker will be supervised, pending a psychological evaluation. Furthermore, this court finds Mr. Ryan's presence in the children's lives to be unsuitable, given his documented history. He is not to have any unsupervised contact with the minors. The gavel came down, and it was over. Ryan stormed out of the courtroom, muttering curses under his breath. Emily stayed seated, her face a mask of shock and humiliation. She turned to me as I gathered my things. "Jake," she said, her voice trembling, "please, we can talk about this." I didn't even look at her. "We already talked, Emily. You made your choice." I walked out of that courtroom with my head high, but inside, I felt a storm brewing. Winning custody of the boys was the victory I needed, but this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Emily and Ryan had dragged me through hell, and I wasn't going to let them slink away without consequences. Emily came by the house a few days later for her first supervised visit. She was subdued, a shadow of the woman who had once been so cocky and manipulative. A social worker was present, quietly observing from the corner of the room as Emily sat stiffly on the couch, trying to engage with Daniel and Lucas. "Hey, guys," she said, her voice soft and hesitant. "I missed you so much." The boys, bless their hearts, were polite but distant. They didn't know the full story, only that Mommy and Daddy weren't together anymore, and she was staying somewhere else. But kids are perceptive. They could sense something wasn't right. I stayed in the kitchen, watching from a distance, my arms crossed. Emily caught my eye once, her face a mix of guilt and desperation. But I wasn't about to make this easy for her. When the visit ended, the social worker escorted Emily out. Before she left, she turned to me. "Jake, can we talk?" I raised an eyebrow. "What's there to talk about?" Her voice wavered. "I know I messed up, but please, don't shut me out completely. The kids need both of us." I bit back the bitter laugh rising in my throat. "Now you're worried about what the kids need? Funny how that didn't cross your mind when you were plotting to take them from me." She flinched like I'd slapped her, but I didn't care. She had made her bed, and now she was lying in it. Meanwhile, Ryan's life was unraveling even faster. The details of his past had spread like wildfire after the court proceedings. His reputation was in tatters, and he'd been forced to resign from his cushy job after his employer got wind of the domestic violence report. Sophie, his ex-wife, had reached out to me after the court case. She wanted to thank me for exposing Ryan's true colors, saying it validated everything she had endured during their marriage. But I wasn't just satisfied with Ryan losing his job. I wanted to make sure he felt the weight of his actions. I enlisted the help of a friend who ran a local community forum. We anonymously posted the court transcripts, including his history of DUIs and domestic abuse allegations. It didn't take long for the story to go viral. Ryan became a pariah practically overnight. His gym membership was revoked after members complained about him. His landlord raised his rent, citing bad press, as a reason for the increased scrutiny. Even Emily started avoiding him, their so-called relationship quickly dissolving under the pressure. Emily, too, was spiraling. Without Ryan's support and the court's financial restrictions, she had to move into a small apartment in a less-than-desirable neighborhood. She called me one night, crying. "Jake, I can't do this," she sobbed. "I can't lose everything. I made a mistake, but I don't deserve this." I kept my voice cold and steady. "You don't deserve this? Emily, you tried to take my kids from me. You tried to ruin my life. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? But I still love them," she cried. "I love them, Jake." "You have a funny way of showing it," I said before hanging up. Despite the satisfaction of watching their lives crumble, I focused most of my energy on the boys. I wanted to make sure they never felt the cracks Emily had caused. We fell into a new routine, me as both mom and dad. I cooked their meals, helped with homework, and cheered them on at soccer games. It was exhausting but fulfilling. Still, I couldn't escape the anger that simmered just below the surface. I wasn't done. Not yet. A few weeks later, I got a call from Lisa. "Jake, you're going to want to see this," she said. She sent me a link to a GoFundMe campaign. The page featured a tearful video of Emily pleading for help. The caption read, "Single mom fighting to stay in her children's lives." The gall of her was almost impressive. She painted herself as the victim, claiming I had manipulated the courts and stripped her of her rights. Comments flooded in, some sympathetic, others harshly critical. I shared the link with Lisa. "Take it down," I said simply. Lisa grinned. "Already on it." She filed a cease and desist order, citing defamation and violation of the court's ruling. The campaign was shut down within days, and Emily was forced to return every penny she had raised. The look on her face the next time I saw her was priceless. Emily had always cared about appearances. She thrived on being seen as the perfect wife, mother, and professional, a woman who could do it all. But after the GoFundMe debacle, her carefully crafted image began to crack under the weight of public scrutiny. It started small, whispers at the grocery store, sideways glances from neighbors. Then it escalated. Someone from our old circle of friends shared her failed campaign on social media, and the post gained traction. "Is this the same Emily who cheated on her husband with her ex?" One comment read. "Wait, isn't her new guy the one with a record?" said another. She became the subject of local gossip, the cautionary tale everyone discussed over coffee. And as much as she tried to keep her head high, I could tell it was getting to her. One day, I got a call from her. "Jake, this has to stop," she snapped, skipping over any pretense of politeness. I leaned back in my chair, smirking. "What has to stop, Emily?" "Don't play dumb," she hissed. "People are spreading lies about me. My boss called me into a meeting today because one of the clients brought it up. I could lose my job." "Lies," I said, letting the word hang in the air. "You mean the truth? Because from where I'm sitting, you're just upset that people finally know the real you." "You're punishing me," she accused, her voice trembling. "This isn't about the kids anymore. You're just being cruel." "Cruel?" I said, my tone icy. "You tried to destroy my life, Emily. You plotted to take my kids, to cut me out of their lives completely. Don't come crying to me now because your plan backfired." I hung up, her protests still echoing on the other end. Ryan wasn't faring any better. He'd been evicted from his apartment after failing to pay rent for 2 months, and he'd resorted to crashing on friends' couches. His once pristine gym bro image was tarnished, and he was avoided like the plague. One of my proudest moments came when Sophie, his ex-wife, sent me a message, "Thank you for exposing him. I've finally gotten sole custody of our daughter. He doesn't even fight it anymore." I didn't respond with anything more than a thumbs up, but inside, I felt a deep sense of justice. Emily tried to recover. She showed up to every supervised visit with the boys, always dressed immaculately, as if trying to convince the social worker she had everything under control. She brought gifts, too many, in my opinion, trying to win back their affection. But kids aren't stupid. They sensed her desperation. "Mom's trying too hard," Daniel said one evening as we were cleaning up after dinner. "It's weird." I crouched down to his level. "She's doing her best," I said carefully. "She just wants to show you she loves you." Daniel frowned, his young face more serious than it should have been. "Then why did she leave?" His words hit me like a gut punch. I pulled him into a hug, trying to hide the tears that pricked the corners of my eyes. "Sometimes, adults make bad choices," I said. "But that doesn't mean she doesn't love you, okay?" He nodded, but I could tell he wasn't convinced. Emily's life continued to unravel, and she became more desperate with each passing week. She sent me long, rambling emails at odd hours of the night, alternating between anger, guilt, and begging for forgiveness. "I can't do this alone," one message read. "The kids are the only thing that keeps me going. Please, Jake, let's find a way to make this work." Another was more direct. "You've won. You've taken everything from me. Are you happy now?" I didn't respond to any of them. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Emily snapped. It happened during a supervised visit. She was playing a board game with the boys, trying to laugh and engage, but Lucas accidentally knocked over the pieces. "Lucas," she snapped, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard. "Can't you be careful for once?" The room went silent. Lucas's eyes filled with tears, and Daniel put an arm around his younger brother protectively. The social worker intervened immediately. "Ms. Walker, please step outside with me." I watched from the kitchen as they spoke in hushed tones near the door. Emily was gesturing wildly, her face red with frustration. Finally, the social worker shook her head and walked back inside. "Mr. Walker," she said, "I think we should end the visit early today." Emily tried to protest, but the social worker cut her off. "Your behavior is unacceptable. I'll be filing a report with the court." As Emily stormed out, she glanced at me. Her eyes were wild, a mixture of anger and despair. "You're ruining me," she spat. I didn't reply. I simply closed the door behind her. Later that night, Lisa called with an update. The social worker's report had reached the court, and the judge had decided to suspend Emily's visitation rights indefinitely, pending a psychiatric evaluation. "She's unraveling," Lisa said. "And honestly, Jake, that's on her." I hung up the phone, staring out the window into the dark night. Emily had wanted to destroy me. Instead, she destroyed herself. Emily's downfall was both rapid and public. Her social media, once filled with carefully curated pictures of a perfect life, became a ghost town. The same friends who once fawned over her posts about her blended family with Ryan were now avoiding her calls. The whispers in the community turned into outright disdain. She was a pariah, and she knew it. I'd be lying if I said I didn't take satisfaction in watching her crumble, but I couldn't afford to revel in her misery. My focus was on my boys. They were my world now, and every decision I made was. One night, I was tucking Lucas into bed when he asked, "Daddy, why doesn't Mommy come around anymore?" My chest tightened. I had to tread carefully. "Mommy's taking some time to figure things out," I said softly, brushing the hair off his forehead. "But she loves you very much. Did I do something wrong?" His voice was small, uncertain. "No, buddy," I said, pulling him into a hug. "You didn't do anything wrong. This isn't your fault. Not even a little bit." I held him close, his tiny arms wrapped around my neck, and I swore to myself that I'd never let him or Daniel feel abandoned again. Meanwhile, Ryan had disappeared entirely. The rumors said he'd left town after losing his job and failing to find another. A mutual acquaintance claimed he was living in his car somewhere 2 states over. Good riddance. Emily, however, wasn't content to vanish quietly. She began calling me late at night, her voice slurred, the desperation seeping through the phone. "Jake," she said during one of these calls, her words stumbling over each other. I don't know what to do anymore. I need help." It was the first time I'd heard her admit to being lost. "Help?" I asked coldly. "The kind of help you thought you'd get from Ryan? How's that working out for you?" There was a long pause, then a broken sob. "I don't have anyone else." I sighed, the bitterness in my chest warring with the faint echo of the love we once shared. "Emily, you made your choices. You knew what you were doing when you dragged Ryan into our lives. You betrayed me. You tried to take our kids away. And now, you're upset because you're finally facing the consequences?" "I know I was wrong," she whispered, barely audible. "I know I hurt you. But I'm begging you, Jake. Please." I hung up without responding. The next day, Lisa called with news. "Emily's lawyer reached out," she said, her tone curious. "She wants to waive her right to appeal the custody decision." I blinked. Why would she do that? "She says she's struggling financially and emotionally and doesn't have the resources to fight anymore." It wasn't like Emily to give up so easily. She had always been tenacious, stubborn to a fault, but I didn't press further. If she wanted to bow out, I wasn't going to stop her. A week later, I got another call, this time from Emily's sister, Megan. "Jake," Megan said, her voice tight with worry, "I don't know what else to do. Emily's not in a good place. She's drinking a lot, she's barely eating, and she keeps talking about how she's lost everything. What do you expect me to do about it?" I asked bluntly. "She needs help," Megan insisted. "Professional help. She's been talking about hurting herself." The words hit me harder than I expected. For all the anger and betrayal, I didn't want Emily to spiral that far. She was still the mother of my children, and as much as she had wronged me, I didn't want Daniel and Lucas to grow up without her entirely. I took a deep breath. "Get her into rehab or therapy," I said. Do whatever you need to, but don't involve me. I'll take care of the kids, and if she gets herself together, maybe she can start seeing them again. But not before. Megan was quiet for a moment. Thank you, she said finally. I hung up, staring at my phone for a long time. Emily checked into a treatment facility the next day. Megan kept me updated, sending short texts about her progress. I didn't respond to most of them. My priority was shielding Daniel and Lucas from the fallout, ensuring they felt safe and loved despite the chaos swirling around them. One night, as I watched them sleep, I felt a pang of sadness. This wasn't the life I had envisioned when Emily and I exchanged vows. We were supposed to be a team, partners through thick and thin. But somewhere along the way, she had chosen a different path, leaving me to pick up the pieces. Still, I couldn't dwell on the past. I had my boys, my career, and a second chance to build a better life. And I wasn't going to waste it. The weeks following Emily's admission to rehab were eerily quiet. Megan continued sending updates, each one cautiously optimistic. She's working through her issues, one message read. She had a breakthrough today, said another. She finally admitted she made mistakes. I read them, then tucked my phone away. Emily's recovery was her battle now, not mine. The boys seemed to adjust to the new normal better than I'd expected. Daniel, ever the big brother, stepped up in small but meaningful ways, helping Lucas with his homework, setting the table without being asked. Lucas, for his part, began to smile more, his laughter slowly returning to the house. I threw myself into creating a stable, happy home for them. Every Saturday, we had adventure days, hiking trails, exploring the local aquarium, or just building massive forts in the living room. At night, I'd read to them, their favorite storybooks turning into a shared ritual that grounded all three of us. But even in the calm, there were moments of doubt. One evening, Daniel sat beside me on the couch as we watched a movie. Out of nowhere, he asked, "Do you think Mommy will ever live with us again?" My chest tightened. I paused the movie, turning to face him. "Why do you ask, buddy?" He shrugged, his eyes downcast. "It just feels weird. Like something's missing." I pulled him into a hug. "I know it's hard, and I know you miss her. But right now, Mommy's working on being the best version of herself. And even if she doesn't live here, she'll always be your mom, and she'll always love you." He nodded, his small frame leaning into mine. "I just want things to be normal again." So did I. About a month later, I got an unexpected call from Emily herself. Her voice was steadier than it had been in months, but there was still an undercurrent of vulnerability. "Jake," she began, I wanted to thank you." "For what?" I asked, my tone cautious. "For not giving up on the boys. For holding things together when I couldn't." I didn't reply, letting her words hang in the air. "I'm still in the program," she continued, "but I'm doing better. And I know I have a long way to go before I can be the kind of mom they deserve. But I'm trying." It was the first time I'd heard genuine humility from her in years. "I'm glad to hear that," I said finally. "For their sake, I hope you keep trying." She hesitated. "Jake, do you think there's ever a chance I could make things right with you? Not as a couple. I know I destroyed that. But as their mom, do you think I could ever be part of their lives again?" I thought about the months of pain, the betrayal, the chaos she had unleashed. And then I thought about Daniel and Lucas, their innocent hope that someday their family might feel whole again. "That's up to you, Emily," I said. "If you prove you're serious about changing, we'll figure it out. But it's going to take time. A lot of time." "I understand," she said softly. As Emily continued her recovery, I focused on moving forward. I started seeing a therapist myself, someone to help me process the whirlwind of emotions I'd buried since everything fell apart. The sessions were eye-opening. I realized just how much I had sacrificed during my marriage, how often I had prioritized Emily's needs over my own, even when it was clear she didn't value my efforts. "You've spent so long trying to be the glue holding everything together," my therapist said one day. "Maybe it's time to let yourself be a little selfish." "What do you want, Jake?" It was a question I hadn't considered in years. I began to rebuild, not just as a father but as a man. I joined a local hiking group, reconnected with old friends, and even went on a few dates. Nothing serious, My focus was still on the boys, but it felt good to remember that I was more than just the sum of my past mistakes. Life wasn't perfect, but it was better. Then, one day, I got a letter from Emily. Handwritten, not an email or a text. Dear Jake, I know I've said sorry 1,000 times, but I want you to know I mean it. Not just for what I did to you, but for what I did to our family. I let my pain and my selfishness destroy something beautiful, and I can never undo that. I know I'm asking for a lot, but I hope you'll let me be part of the boys' lives again someday. Not for me, but for them. They deserve a mom who shows up for them, even if it's from a distance. Thank you for everything you've done, for holding them close when I let go. I'll never stop trying to make it up to them. Emily, I read the letter twice, then folded it and put it in a drawer. The road ahead wasn't clear, but for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope, not for us, but for our boys. Emily's letter lingered in my thoughts for days, even as I tried to focus on work, the boys, and my own healing. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as too little, too late, but another part, the part that still remembered the woman I had once loved, wondered if she could really change. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I spent the week quietly observing Daniel and Lucas, trying to gauge how they were handling the absence of their mother. Daniel had grown quieter in the evenings, retreating to his room with his Legos, while Lucas clung to me more than ever, asking endless questions about our plans for the next day, the next week, the next year. It was during one of those moments, as Lucas peppered me with questions about summer vacation, that I realized I owed them more than just stability. I owed them honesty. The following Saturday, I sat them both down in the living room. Daniel perched on the edge of the couch, his hands folded in his lap, while Lucas leaned against me, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. Boys, I began, keeping my tone as gentle as I could. I want to talk to you about Mommy. They both froze, their eyes widening slightly. I took a deep breath and continued. Mommy's been going through a hard time. That's why she hasn't been able to spend as much time with you lately. But she's working really hard to get better. Daniel frowned. Is she sick? In a way, I said carefully. She's been dealing with some big feelings, and she needed help to figure them out. But she's trying to make things right. Lucas looked up at me, his brow furrowed. Does she still love us? Of course she does, I said, pulling him closer. She loves you both so much, and she wants to be part of your lives again someday. But it's going to take time. Daniel bit his lip, clearly trying to process everything. Will we see her again? I nodded. That's the plan. But only when she's ready, and when we're ready too. 2 weeks later, Emily reached out through Megan, asking for a supervised visit with the boys. She'd completed her initial rehab program and was now attending therapy regularly. The social worker who oversaw her previous visits agreed to facilitate. I debated it for days, weighing the risks against the potential benefits. In the end, I said yes, not for Emily's sake, but for Daniel and Lucas. The visit was scheduled for a Sunday afternoon at a local park. I brought the boys, arriving a few minutes early to prepare them for what was coming. She's going to be really happy to see you, I said, kneeling in front of them. Just be yourselves, okay? You don't have to say or do anything you're not comfortable with. Lucas nodded, clutching my hand tightly, while Daniel gave a small, determined nod. When Emily arrived, she looked different. She was thinner, her face more drawn, but her eyes were clear, and there was a tentative softness in her demeanor I hadn't seen in years. Hi, boys, she said, her voice trembling as she crouched down to their level. I've missed you so much. Daniel hesitated, then stepped forward and gave her a hug. Lucas followed, clinging to her waist for a long moment before pulling back to study her face. Why did you leave us? He asked bluntly. Emily's face crumpled, but she didn't look away. I made a big mistake, she said, her voice breaking. And I hurt you and Daddy, and I'm so sorry. But I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. Lucas seemed to accept her answer, nodding solemnly before reaching for my hand again. The visit went better than I expected. Emily played with the boys on the swings, helped Lucas build a sandcastle, and even managed to coax a laugh out of Daniel during a game of tag. When it was time to leave, she hugged them tightly, tears streaming down her face. I love you both so much, she whispered. As we walked back to the car, Daniel looked up at me. Mommy's different, he said simply. I nodded. She's trying to be better. Lucas tugged on my sleeve. Will we see her again soon? We'll see, I said, ruffling his hair. Later that night, after the boys were in bed, I found myself staring at Emily's letter again. For all her faults, for all the pain she had caused, there was a part of me that wanted to believe she could change. Not for me, but for the boys. I grabbed my phone and sent her a text. You did well today. Keep it up. Her reply came almost instantly. Thank you. I won't let them down again. I put the phone down and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Forgiveness wasn't easy, and trust would take even longer to rebuild. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we could all start to heal. After Emily's first supervised visit with the boys, life returned to its steady rhythm. For a while, it was peaceful. The boys were happy, their routines uninterrupted, and Emily kept her distance, respecting the boundaries I had set. But with each passing week, she became more insistent. Jake, she texted one evening, can I please have another visit? The boys seemed happy. I just want to see them again. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to say no, to shut her out completely, but I couldn't ignore the look on Daniel's face after their last visit. The small spark of hope in his eyes that maybe, just maybe, his mom was coming back. After a long pause, I replied, one more visit. Same rules. The second visit was at a public library, chosen for its neutral, calm environment. The boys greeted Emily with cautious smiles, and she quickly settled into their world, helping Lucas pick out a stack of books and sitting with Daniel as he flipped through a graphic novel. As I watched from a distance, I noticed something I hadn't seen in years, a genuine connection. Emily wasn't performing or trying too hard. She was just present, fully engaged with her children. When the visit ended, she approached me cautiously, her expression tentative. Thank you, she said softly. I nodded. It's not about you. It's about them. She flinched slightly but didn't argue. I know, she said, and I'm grateful. Over the next few months, the visits became more frequent. Always supervised, always structured. Emily continued her therapy, and Megan assured me that she was staying on track. The boys began to warm up to her again, their initial hesitation giving way to cautious excitement. Lucas started asking when he'd see her next, and Daniel began sharing stories about their visits during our nightly dinners. But while the boys' relationship with Emily improved, mine remained distant. One evening, after the boys were asleep, my phone buzzed with a text from Emily. Can we talk? I stared at the message, debating whether to respond. Against my better judgment, I typed, about what? A few moments later, my phone rang. Jake, she said when I answered, her voice nervous but steady. I know I've lost your trust, and I know I can't undo the damage I've caused, but I want to thank you for giving me a chance to be there for the boys again. I'm not doing this for you, I said bluntly. I know, she said quickly. I know this is for them, but I also know you didn't have to let me back in. And I'm trying, Jake. I'm really trying. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. What do you want, Emily? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I want to know if there's any chance we could co-parent, really co-parent. Not just these visits, but as a team. For them. Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. You expect me to forget everything you did? I asked, my voice sharp. No, she said softly. I don't expect that. I want to move forward. For the boys' sake. I closed my eyes, the weight of her request settling over me. Co-parenting with Emily would mean letting her back into our lives in a way I wasn't sure I was ready for. But it would also mean giving the boys the chance to have their mother in their lives, a chance they deserved, even if she didn't. I'll think about it, I said finally. The next day, I called Lisa to discuss Emily's request. She's asking for more involvement, I explained. What's your take? Lisa was quiet for a moment, then said, Jake, I know how much she hurt you. But if she's genuinely trying to change, and if it's in the boys' best interests, it might be worth considering. With boundaries, of course. Boundaries, I echoed. Start small, she advised. Maybe unsupervised visits for short periods. Gradually build from there if she proves herself. But make it clear, one misstep and it's over. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Thanks, Lisa. That weekend, I sat down with Emily during one of her visits. The boys were playing nearby, their laughter echoing through the park. I've been thinking about what you said, I began, watching her carefully. About co-parenting. Her eyes widened slightly, hope flickering across her face. I'm willing to try, I said, holding up a hand before she could interrupt. But only under strict conditions. You'll get short, unsupervised visits to start, nothing overnight. And if I see even a hint of instability or poor judgment, it's done. No second chances. Emily nodded quickly. I understand. I'll do whatever it takes. The first unsupervised visit was nerve-wracking. Emily picked the boys up from the house and took them to a nearby museum. I spent the entire afternoon pacing, checking my phone every 5 minutes for updates. When she brought them home, they were full of excitement, chattering about the dinosaur exhibit and the giant skeleton they'd seen. Emily smiled at me as she handed over their backpacks. Thank you, she said quietly. I nodded, closing the door after her. Slowly, tentatively, we began to find a rhythm. Co-parenting wasn't easy, but it was possible. And for the first time in years, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we could create a better future for our boys. Months turned into a year, and what had once seemed impossible became a fragile reality. Emily continued to rebuild her relationship with Daniel and Lucas, and while I kept my guard up, I couldn't deny the positive changes in her. She showed up on time for every visit, communicated respectfully, and even started pitching in with school events and soccer practices. But trust, for me, remained elusive. I agreed to co-parent for the boys' sake, but I kept her at arm's length. No late-night conversations. No reminiscing. We were partners in parenting and nothing more. Then, one chilly autumn afternoon, Emily asked for a meeting. We sat on opposite ends of a cafe booth, the warm smell of coffee filling the air between us. She was nervous, fidgeting with her napkin, her eyes darting to the window every few seconds. I want to talk about something important, she said finally, her voice trembling slightly. I leaned back, crossing my arms. Go on. I've been offered a job in another city, she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. It's a good opportunity, a chance for a fresh start, but it's far away. My chest tightened. How far? 4 hours by car, she said. It's not permanent, just a year-long contract. But I wanted to ask, would you be okay with me taking the boys for a few weekends here and there? Maybe a week during the summer? Her request hit me like a freight train. After everything, after all the progress we'd made, she wanted to leave? What about their routine? I asked, my voice cold. Their school? Their friends? They'd stay here with you, she said quickly. I'm not asking to uproot them. I want to stay in their lives, even if I'm not here full-time. Her words carried a weight of sincerity I hadn't heard in years. I didn't give her an answer right away. I needed time to think. Over the next few days, I watched Daniel and Lucas more closely than ever, trying to imagine how they'd handle Emily's absence. They had grown stronger, more independent over the past year, but they still lit up whenever she was around. One evening, as I tucked them into bed, Lucas looked up at me and asked, "When's the next time we'll see Mommy?" I hesitated. "Soon," I said, brushing his hair off his forehead. "Can she stay for Christmas this year?" he asked, his voice full of hope. I froze. Christmas had always been ours, a time for the three of us to bond, away from the chaos Emily had brought into our lives. But looking into Lucas's wide, innocent eyes, I couldn't bring myself to say no. "I'll think about it," I said. The next time I saw Emily, I told her she could take the job under one condition. She had to maintain regular communication with the boys, weekly video calls, visits whenever possible, and absolutely no broken promises. "I'll hold you to this, Emily," I warned. "The second you let them down, it's over." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you, Jake. I won't let them down. I swear." True to her word, Emily kept in touch. She called the boys every Sunday evening, asking about their week and listening to their stories with genuine interest. She visited once a month, staying in a hotel and spending her days taking them on small adventures, mini golf, movie nights, trips to the park. Slowly but surely, the boys began to see her as a steady presence in their lives again. Christmas came, and for the first time since the divorce, Emily joined us. I was hesitant at first, worried about how her presence might disrupt our traditions, but it turned out better than I expected. She brought thoughtful gifts for the boys, books for Daniel, a dinosaur puzzle for Lucas, and even surprised me with a framed photo of the three of us from years ago, back when things were still good. "I know we'll never be a family like we were before," she said quietly as we cleaned up after dinner. "But I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you've done for the boys, for keeping them safe, for letting me come back." I nodded, unsure of how to respond. As the years passed, the arrangement settled into something resembling peace. Emily eventually returned to the city, her contract completed, and continued to co-parent alongside me. We weren't friends, but we were civil, and for Daniel and Lucas, that was enough. The boys grew into confident, kind-hearted young men. Daniel excelled in academics, earning a scholarship to a prestigious university, while Lucas discovered a passion for art, filling the house with sketches and paintings. Through it all, I remained their anchor, their constant in a world that had once felt so uncertain. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Daniel looked up from his plate and said, "You know, Dad, I think everything worked out the way it was supposed to." I raised an eyebrow. "How do you mean?" He shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. "We've got you. We've got Mom, and we're happy. That's all that matters, right?" I felt a lump rise in my throat as I nodded. "Yeah, buddy. That's all that matters." In the end, I didn't just get my kids back. I got my life back. And while Emily and I would never fully mend the damage that had been done, we found a way to coexist for the sake of the family we had built. It wasn't the ending I had envisioned, but it was enough. And for the first time in a long time, I was at peace. Oh my God, another really good one. I really hope you enjoyed this Reddit story video. I had a great time reading this. If you want more of this kind of content, just leave a comment, let me know. Follow my channel. I'm really trying to hit 1,000 subs before the end of the year. And we can do it. It's going to happen, guys. Thank you so much. Now, everybody have a great night and have a sweet dreams.